The Switch has never really been in short supply when it comes to controllers, but one thing that the Switch is in short supply of is more expensive Pro controllers. I reviewed more than a few on this channel, as I'm sure I'll be reviewing even more in the days to come, especially with the OLED model dropping later this year. If you don't want to miss out on that content, make sure to subscribe. Despite the fact that the official Switch controller goes by that name, when you look at what the Switch has to offer compared to, say, the Xbox or the PlayStation, those systems have very expensive specialized controllers that are going as high as $200, whereas the Switch, pretty much nothing ever goes to the same price point or even above the price point of the official Switch controller at $70. Well, earlier this year, PowerA, one of the main licensed manufacturers for Switch controllers, is trying to actually break that barrier a little bit with their Fusion Pro controller. This is the most expensive officially licensed Switch controller at $100. And honestly, it's a little bit weird to me because when I think PowerA, I don't necessarily think high quality Pro controller. I really think of them for their cheaper off-brand controller options, some of which I do really like if you're looking to save a little money, but they're not my first thought for expensive. So when I first got this controller in, that really kind of shaded my perspective, and I gotta say, some stuff about it really pleasantly surprised me, and there's other stuff that I think does hold it back. Let's talk about it. First, I want to talk about special features because that's what I think PowerA is really leaning into in terms of trying to qualify this as a Pro controller. And there's a couple key things that stand out. First off, back paddles. This is kind of one of the immediate things that people think of when it comes to Pro controller options. It's very useful for competitive games, especially FPS, where you want to remap certain buttons that you don't have to reach to hit one of the front-facing buttons for. Now, PowerA's cheaper controllers do have back buttons, but paddles are a little bit different in two main respects. One, by being a paddle, it's a little more pronounced and thus like kind of out there, you're not reaching for it like a button. And two, there are 4 of them on this controller as opposed to the pair of back buttons you'd find on their cheaper wireless controllers. Now, to be honest, I do generally prefer back buttons over back paddles, primarily because with the back buttons, they can be placed in a way where your fingers don't have to rest on them and you can kind of avoid them if you don't want to accidentally press. These paddles, though, if you want to hold the controller comfortably, you basically have to rest your fingers on them. Now, if you're not using all these paddles and you only want to use a couple of them, they are removable individually. And a nice feature of this as well is that if you want to use this controller but not make use of the back paddles for a particular game, the whole module is actually removable, which is a nice touch. It's worth noting that while you are resting your fingers on these all the time, they're not overly sensitive, so it's pretty hard to do an accidental click, but I still think there is that little bit of danger there. I also wish the paddle pull did have a little bit more of a satisfying click. These are kind of a little mushier. It's fine, it gets the job done, but there's just something about a satisfying click that makes you feel better about it. Programming the back paddles is pretty straightforward and intuitive. Basically, you just have to hold down this program button, and while holding it down, click whichever paddle you want to program, and then the button you want to tie to it. It's complex enough to the point where it's not super easy to do in the middle of gameplay, but if you're between matches, it's pretty easy to set up. Another major feature that's common on a lot of Pro controllers that's present here on the Fusion controller are swappable sticks. The Fusion actually comes with a carrying case that also holds the 2 swappable sticks that you can have, both of which are longer sticks, which afford you a little more precision and controlled movement, with one of them having a concave head and the other one being convex. Personally, I like the convex a little more for things like precise aiming for snipers, but if you don't like the feeling of that and you'd rather have the more traditional concave head, there is that option there as well. And while we're on the subject, this is actually one of the things that bothers me about this controller. I like the fact that it has the swappable sticks, but when they're aiming for something that's meant to have a Pro controller feeling, it kind of feels like the stick heads themselves, they cheaped out a little on. It's the same kind of material as their traditional wireless controller or their wired controller, and it's not an awful stick by any means, but the type of plastic it is and the shape of the concave head just doesn't feel that great to me. It feels cheaper, and when you're trying to target this as being a more expensive option, one of the main things you're going to be using all the time are the sticks, and to have those still feel like the kind of cheaper sticks on their other controllers, it just feels really unsatisfying to me. They're not the worst ever, but compared to the official Pro controller stick heads or even the sticks on the 8BitDo Pro 2, they just feel lackluster. Speaking of swapping sticks, you can also swap the faceplate on the Fusion controller. When it first ships to you, it'll actually have a black faceplate on it that has a full blackout design, which looks fine. I personally think this white with red trim looks a lot better. This was shipped with it as well, so I could just swap right away. I just think it looks really super clean and stands out as one of the better looking third-party controllers for the Switch with this aesthetic. The sticks have another potentially very big problem, depending on what kind of games you like to play. I've actually discovered that while messing with the stick calibration menu on the Switch, that the faceplate on this controller limits the full range of motion of the stick heads. So for instance, if we actually open up the stick calibration menu, which I'll go to right now real quick. For instance, let's open up the right stick, and I have found that on the right stick, while the faceplate is on, it doesn't actually read tilting it to the right all the way. So for instance, if I go up, that ring lights up to show that, yeah, it's reading full tilt. But as I turn it this way, you'll see that the ring around it begins to turn off because it's not reading 100% tilt. Now, if I remove the faceplate, now it's able to read it. So it isn't an issue of how it's reading the stick, it's the fact that the faceplate on this controller is preventing it from going all the way. Now, for a lot of games, the difference between 90% and 100% full tilt doesn't actually matter all that much. Some games just need you to go over 50% and you're good to go. But there are some titles where needing to read full tilt is important, and if this controller doesn't let you do that, that can be a problem. Again, this is an issue you can get rid of by just simply removing the faceplate and bam, you now have full tilt, but then the front face of the controller is not as comfortable because you don't have the faceplate on, and honestly, this just seems like a really odd oversight that's frustrating. Couple other features to mention really quick. This can turn on your Switch from rest, which I know is a major deal for a lot of people. It does have an auxiliary port, so you can plug in a headset in order to hear game audio, although this only works in a wired connection mode. If you want to use it wirelessly, that's not an option. And it does have the ability to swap between a dedicated wireless or wired mode. So in wired mode, you not only get the benefit of that headset support, but you're going to get a little bit faster connection as well. Now, as far as how it actually feels to use the controller, I do like the shape and grip of it. Like I mentioned, I'm not a huge fan of resting my fingers on the back paddles, but when this module is removed, it has a really comfortable rubberized grip that just gives a little extra softness. The front-facing buttons have a little more resistance than I would like. It's not terrible, but it just feels like I'm putting a little more force than is necessary to click down on them. Shoulder buttons feel fine, and the D-pad is fine. I played a couple different retro games with it. It's a little fickle with some of its diagonal inputs. You have to be pretty precise on pressing both directions at once, but it's definitely not the worst one I've used. One minor thing, by the way, that I do appreciate about this controller is that when it comes to PowerA's wired controllers, they have a micro USB port that is designed to be shaped a specific way, so you have to use one of their cables. On the Fusion controller, it's just a simple little port right here for USB-C, so you can use whatever cable you want. It can be the one that's included with it, it can be your Switch charger if you just want to plug in and charge the controller up for a little bit, or if you have another USB-C to USB-A cable to use to plug it into your Switch, that's going to work just fine, not having to worry about keeping track of their specific one. When it comes to the $100 price point, this thing's a bit of a tug of war with me, because I think if you just look at the feature list with things like having the back paddles, swappable sticks, it includes a case, yeah, that can make sense, but there's a lot of other cuts on this thing that really makes me apprehensive. Sure, you've got swappable sticks, but I don't really like the feeling of a lot of these stick heads, and you don't even get full range of motion on them when the faceplate is on the controller. The D-pad could use some work, and while it does have a fairly extensive list of features, one thing it doesn't have is rumble in any form whatsoever. Now, sure, rumble is something that isn't necessarily a pro feature. You don't need it to be better at games, but it is something that I think is a very core interactive aspect of a lot of nicer controllers, and not having that in one that costs $100 just feels weird to me. If money isn't an issue to you at all and you're really interested in having a full set of 4 back paddles, I think this controller can be worth grabbing. You just might have to keep in mind that you'll need to remove the faceplate every now and then for certain games. But when you look at the number of other controller options available on the Switch and what you can get at lower value price points, whether that's the official Switch Pro controller, the 8BitDo Pro 2, or even PowerA's own enhanced wireless controller, that one goes for a lot cheaper, still offers some similar features like having a pair of back buttons, and I think ends up being more worth it for the price point you're paying. Not to mention they come in a lot of great designs. It's not a bad controller, it's just for the price you're paying, I think there are better value options out there. Now, that being said, if you are interested in grabbing this controller or any of the other ones that I talked about in this video, I'll have those linked below down in the description. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys later.